But the handoff from deciding to delivering is where the outcome really takes shape. And it is the part that most often goes unmanaged. Think about a strategy that you have been championing for years, with your credibility on the line, and finally got approved. Since then, two things have been happening to it. The first, a decision that should have been made weeks ago, is still sitting there. The options are worked out, everyone has a view, but nobody is sure who has the authority to make the call. So the milestone slips while the decision waits. The second is worse. Somewhere down the line, a decision that affects your program, one you never heard about, already got made. You find out when a downstream piece breaks and the rework lands back on you. Neither one is a people problem. The issue is nobody decided upfront who decides what. The strategy you champion is becoming something very different from what was approved. And when the results come in, you are the one in the governance meeting answering questions. So why does this happen to good strategies run by smart people? Part of the answer is what happens right after the decision. In a lot of organizations, once something is approved, it gets treated as finished. The hard part feels over, attention moves to the next fire, but the handoff from deciding to delivering is where the outcome really takes shape. And it is the part that most often goes unmanaged. From there, two things decide what actually gets delivered. The first is who gets to make the 1,000 decisions along the way. The second is whether anyone notices in time if the plan starts to go off course. Here's the part that matters. These two systems exist whether or not you build them. If you do not design them deliberately, a version of them tends to assemble themselves. Out of habit, out of the org chart, out of whoever happens to be in the room. This is what I call the default operating system. And you can end up living with whatever it produces, whether it serves the strategy or not. The good news is that both can be built deliberately. So the strategy that gets approved is the one that actually gets delivered. Let me show you how each one works and what it looks like when it fails. You can read the full analysis newsletter, link in the description. Start with who gets to decide. At Amazon, a frontline customer service rep can pull a product off the website on their own the moment complaints start clustering. No manager, no meeting needed. Amazon decided ahead of time that this costs cheap to reverse. So the person closest to the problem should make it immediately. A bad product gets caught and pulled in minutes instead of climbing a chain of approvals while the damage spreads. Same ideas on the factory floor, where any worker can stop the line in the instant they spot a defect. The authority is pushed down on purpose to the people who see the problem first. Now picture every decision in your company sitting on a pyramid. Strategic bets at the narrow top, the high volume operational costs at the wide base. A common failure here is what I call an altitude mismatch, a decision getting made at the wrong height. An altitude mismatch runs in two directions. A call should sit high gets made at the base, by someone who sees their own pieces but not the whole board. A choice that strategy depends on gets locked in before anyone with the full picture weighs in. The other direction is more common, and it is the one from the top of this video. A small reversible call climbs all the way up and waits there, behind people busy with bigger things. The decision that should have taken a day sits for 3 weeks, and the milestone slips while it waits. Same mismatch, opposite ends. The heavy calls make too low, the light ones stuck too high. Setting this up on purpose is simpler than it sounds, and it does not need a heavy system. The first question is which decision even make the list, not the hundreds of routine calls a program throws off, only the few the strategy actually rests on. To find them, start from the goal and ask what has to be true for it to work. The decisions that touch those few things are your strategy critical ones. The rest stay where they are. Normal operations already handle them, and they never go on the list at all. That short list becomes decision rights matrix, and it fits on one page. Each strategy critical decisions is one row with 4 columns. First, the decision itself, named plainly. Second, one owner, a single name, not a committee. Third, how far down it can live, which you set with one question. If this call goes wrong, can we walk it back cheaply? If yes, it belongs low with the people closest to it. If no, it belongs at the top. Fourth, the one trigger that forces it up anyway, like a spend threshold or safety issue. Fill the template over in an afternoon, and the stall decision finally have an owner, while the dangerous one have a route up before they break anything. The second system is the easiest one to get wrong, because it looks like you already have it. As a company, how it monitors the strategy and it points at results. Revenue, market share, the big numbers. But results are the last thing to move. By the time they turn, the cause is already months old. Watching only outcomes give you a post-mortem schedule. You learn what went wrong after it already has. And it is blind to the bigger danger. The world changing underneath, a strategy that still looks like it's winning. So how do you actually catch it in time? The tool has 2 parts. The first is a matrix system with 3 tiers, each moving at a different honest speed. Let me run it on one example. Say your strategy is to cut procurement costs by consolidating 3 suppliers down to a single preferred partner. Tier 1 is your input matrix, the activities you directly control. Here, that's how much volume you have actually moved to the new supplier this month. It should move in weeks. If it is not moving, you're not executing yet, no matter what the top line number says. Tier 2 is the process matrix. Is that activity turning into the results you preferred? This is the tier that does the real work, and the one where it's easier to fool yourself. The savings come last. What you watch in between are the operational signals that say they're on track. Is the new supplier delivering on time at a quality on the volume that already moved? How often are you paying for the expedited freight to cover a miss? Those move within a quarter, and if they hold, the savings follow. Here's the trap. It is tempting to track the percent of volume transition instead and call that progress. That is just tier 1 activity dressed up. The volume can climb fast while on-time slips and the expedites pile up. That number was a leading indicator that did not lead. Tier 2's whole job is to catch the gap between an input that is moving and an outcome that is not, before the outcome can lie to you. Tier 3 is your outcome matrix. In this case, total landed cost and margin, the result the strategy was chasing. They lag by a quarter or two, so you read them late. If you lean only on this tier, the problem will surface long after it was cheap to fix. The second part is the one Kodak skipped. Kodak built the first working digital camera in 1975. It saw the future before anyone and chose to protect its film business instead. What it never built was a signal strong enough to override a healthy income statement and force a rethink. Film margins stayed fat right up until they collapsed, and the company filed for bankruptcy in 2012. That missing signal is a tripwire on the 1 or 2 assumptions the whole strategy rests on. Those are the same few things you started from when you picked your critical decisions. In the supplier example, what has to be true is that your one supplier stays reliable and cost-advantaged. So that is your tripwire. If their on-time rate slips 2 months running, you reopen a second source before a disruption takes the whole line down. Kodak's assumption was that film had years left, and it chose not to watch the one number that would have told it otherwise. You do not have to build either system from a blank page. I have put both of them into one free download, a one-page decision right matrix for the first system and the 3-tier matrix with assumption tripwires for the second, each with an AI prompt that drafts the first pass. The download link is in the description. Now you learn the two systems you have to put in place before execution starts. One decides who gets to make the calls that come after. The other tells you the truth about whether they're working and whether the ground has moved. Skip them, you do not get chaos. You get the default operating system. The thousand small calls that get made by whoever is closest under whatever pressure they are under that week. The problem surface in the quarterly review after the budget is spent and the cheap fixes are gone. And the strategy you prove can drift into one you never signed off on. The strategic operator who actually delivered the impact they were after are the ones who design those two parts on purpose, who decides and how they will know if the ground moves. That's what turns a strategy you prove into the impact you intended.